Anthony Lynn being hired, to me, wasn't just about hiring Anthony Lynn, who I thought was the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Got demoted midseason, and Campbell took over.
Yeah.
But to me, that meant two things. One, you had to, restock the cupboard, because I think it was kind of clear to Kyle, we're going to lose McDaniel. And Anthony Lynn is known as a run game specialist. What he really thrived at with Rex Ryan back in like 09 and 10 for the New York Jets when they were fucking good. They had the number one defense. I think they were like the number one rushing offense. He was their rushing game coordinator. I don't love him calling the plays, but he doesn't have to do that. I didn't quite realize that like him and Kyle had known each other for a long time. And Kyle called him like one of his favorite players ever when he used to play for his dad back in the day with like John Elway. But also, I didn't know if that was just purely McDaniel taking off, or the one guy Kyle took, if you remember when he was hired or brought with him. Remember the big story when Kyle was hired, like, will he keep Tom Rathman? Tom Rathman is here. And he's like, well, I told Bobby Turner, like, he was a lock to come with me, and Rathman just bounced. But Bobby Turner, and I saw Barrow's tweet, 72 years old. So, I don't know how many years left you have if you're Bobby Turner. He hasn't retired yet, but it could be a double whammy. I don't know what you thought about. That's where my mind went, that it might have been even more about Bobby Turner leaving, because Anthony Lynn is a running back coach at heart and / can scheme the run game in this offense, knowing what Kyle and the Shanahan, and clearly just a family friend. They say one thing about this group is they're pretty fucking tight knit. This is a pretty tight knit family.
Was assistant head coach part of Anthony Lynn's title?
Yes, it was.
So and that was Embry's title, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, I think the Chargers offense, I think Anthony Lynn was in a unique spot year one with Herbert, in that Herbert looked good. You normally don't get fired when your quarterback looks good. Your first round quarterback looks really good. As you and I have discussed, his game management left a lot to be desired. They had like 6 games that were just, or the end of a half or the end of games, like, what is going on?
Special team disasters, I remember.
But he's clearly a good football coach. And I remember watching Hard Knocks, just an impressive guy and a likable guy and clearly a leader, right? So I think he's a great ad. I think the thing you probably lose with McDaniel that's hard to put your finger on, and you and I have talked about, like, who can tell Kyle no? Who was it that told him you're not drafting Mac Jones? Who can tell Kyle no? Mike McDaniel's on the short list, I would imagine, and at the top of the list of people unintimidated by what Kyle might think about what they have to say. And that's probably really valuable, right?
That's healthy, yeah.
Very healthy, yeah, very healthy. Not that Anthony Lynn has a pretty established standing in the NFL, right? There are guys that have a pretty established. Bobby Slowick's been around him forever. Wes Welker has been around the block. But I would imagine Mike could say some things to Kyle that he doesn't have to apologize for later, And that's really valuable. I mean, it's incredibly valuable. We don't know how to quantify it.
Stop calling toss sweep, you fucking crazy asshole.
That's when Kyle just switches off the headset. But, right? I mean, I don't think Kyle took a lot of other people's play call suggestions. But as we talked about before, he ran the Trent Williams third down play against the Rams that they lost a yard on, and they ended up in a 4th and a long 2. Kyle had said on his headset to his offensive staff, guys, what do we like here on fourth down, 4th and short? Maybe he said it before the 2nd down play. That's what Kyle said. So I think that's probably the part that's hard to quantify. And this goes back, I think, to the constant conversation about who you hire. This is why I want my head coach first and foremost. If I can, I'm not going to hire a worse coach just for the sake of hiring an offensive coach. But I do want my head coach more often than not to be the guy who calls the offense, because if your offense is any good, you are losing guys left and right.
Well, it's my main issue. I can't fathom hiring a head coach who is under like 50 years old and going, I'm hiring you because while the study that the Eagles did once upon a time was true, being a coordinator does not determine your success. Because Pat Shurmur, both times he was hired as a head coach, was an awesome coordinator. Remember how good he was with Case Keenum at Minnesota? They went to the NFC Championship. Then he was hired with the Giants, and it was like, oh my God, this guy sucks. And it happens all the time. It feels like it happens a lot with the New York Giants, but it happens on a ton of teams. Defensively, too. I just do not get hiring Uberflus and going, we're hiring you because the Colts were really good at defense. And we think you're a good guy. And then you'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to call defense. It happened with Saleh last year. And then their defense is fucking terrible. It boggles my mind. But Uberflus is a good example. Well, they bring in this Getsy guy from the Packers. Well, what happens if their offense is good and Justin Fields becomes like a borderline Pro Bowl guy in 2 years? I would say Getsy is a 1,000,000% lock to become a head coach, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And that is the situation basically anywhere.
But it's like, can you hire Getsy over Eberflus? You know, are you willing to do that? Like the Dolphins were willing to almost hire ahead of the cycle.
It happens on offense. You know, it happens when the defensive coach has the offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
that's where if you just.
But what I'm saying is, you almost have to hire ahead of the cycle, right? Like,
well, isn't that what Minnesota did with Kevin O'Connell?
Yeah, and it's maybe what the Dolphins did here, and it's now the thing with the Bears is like, is Eberflus is the guy you're. Okay, we'll see.
This is only a conversation with defensive guys because the offensive guy, the moment your offense is good, if D'Amico was an offensive coordinator. If he was an offensive coordinator, he 100% would have been a lock to be a head coach this year.
If Zach Wilson all of a sudden has some incredible year too, they're going to need to find a new offensive coordinator for Zach Wilson, right?
Because you think
Matt LaFleur is going to get a job. He'll get a job.
Does it Matt or Mike? I always get those two mixed up.
Mike LaFleur is the head coach of the Packers, right? Or is it Matt LaFleur? Now I'm mixed up.
Yeah, I think Matt.
Matt is the coach of the Packers. Yeah, you're right.
He was coaching today, wasn't he?
He was. It was weird. I thought it was a flashback. I'm like, why am I looking at Matt LaFleur right now? And his incredible
I looked up at one clip and him and Russell, and I'm like, well, he's used to diva quarterbacks. I mean, he can handle this little Pro Bowl relationship pretty well.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know why I got my LaFleur's mixed up, but I do give the Dolphins credit on if you want an offensive coach to be your coach.
It came down to the two guys that were both offensive play callers.
And honestly, it didn't feel to me like the idea that Kellen Moore
plays.
Kellen was a lock head coach a year ago. And then it got kind of weird this year in Dallas, right?
Dak was kind of hit or miss down the stretch. If their offense had been more explosive and they beat the Niners, is Kellen getting this job? Is it easier to sell yourself on going, this guy's seen, especially this year for the Niners, what they overcame? Like he can come to an interview pretty like knowing Shanahan's life, right? Everything he does, but then also going like what we went through this year. I know how I've taken all these notes of how Kyle handles these different situations that work, that have won us 4 playoff games the last 3 years. Like I've seen all these scenarios. I've seen it when we're good. I've seen it when we're not good. I've seen us battle back. I actually think he brings a lot more to the table than like Kellen Moore would in an interview on just being able to say what I've seen. And this is where I think he's 38 years old. I'm a big believer that like age is the most overrated thing. Your experience matters. Like Mike McDaniel, for a younger guy, has a lot of experience. Think of all the shit he's seen. He could go like, this one thing that we fucked up, me and Kyle have been talking about forever in the 28-3 loss in the Super Bowl. I had this play for him, and we pushed back, and then we went with another play, and then we thought, like, he's got some pretty unique experiences. When we had RG3 and Kirk Cousins, we thought this. Think of all the things that he could just bring up in an interview for NFL circumstances. When Matt Schaub first got there, we knew he could do something. So me, Kubiak, and Kyle, we built, that's 12 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
he's a very experienced young guy.
I would say his sobriety, in the same way we talked about the Raiders this year through tragic circumstances and difficult circumstances, having 2 team leaders, Darren Waller and Max Crosby, that have been through some real shit in life. I would imagine here you are now walking into, I would say, what is a little bit of a controversial situation in Miami, or at least the Dolphins have controversy to deal with, right? It's not really going to fall on, it's not on Mike McDaniel's desk to deal with, whatever comes. But there's just noise out there with the Brian Flores lawsuit. There's noise out there just with Tua. There's noise out there because your team's not as good as people thought you should be, and your quarterback. Like, there's just a lot going on. And here's a guy who's been through like a real life situation.
We got sent to rehab while he was coaching. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I remember at the Super Bowl when Atlanta went, that was a big story.
Yeah,
they had Kyle, and I think Dimitrov deserved a lot, like help save his life. I mean, I don't know if he was going to drink himself to death, but just his career was headed the wrong direction. And I actually ended up on a clip I think the Niners had put out maybe a couple years ago of just like 5 questions. he brought it up. He's like, I don't drink. Now, I don't think he really got into the depth of the details of why, but I mean,
I would imagine he did in the interview.
100%. I think it's something he can be very open up and proud about.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a pretty big moment, I would say, for the 49ers. Back-to-back years, getting 2 guys head coaching jobs with a third that you could argue on paper might be the most, a guy that played in the NFL for a long time, kind of feels a little Vrabel-y, just like DeMeco Ryans is going to be a head coach. That's a fucking lock. Mike McDaniel, to me, was not a lock.
No.
Robert Saleh became that. DeMeco is a lock.
McDaniel might have been somewhat maybe helped by the circumstances, right? Where Miami had a GM, so you're not getting a guy who wants all the power. And then Miami became a little weird. And so maybe you do cut out some of the top candidates.
But who else was in the mix? It felt like Mike was been in the mix before the Flores thing even came out, didn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, Flores got fired. Like that in and of itself created an opening where it was kind of an odd opening, right?
It was the shocking firing of the year, right?
I think the other part of it, the other loss, just from a personality standpoint, I think Kyle probably with players at times is a little more loose than sometimes he looks. But clearly McDaniel is just a part of a positive energy. And maybe that's where Anthony Lynn's personality also helps, because Anthony comes off as a guy with just life perspective and, a good feel for what an NFL coaching staff and locker room and player relationships are supposed to be. But clearly Mike was a positive on the coaching staff from a personality standpoint. It was just a unique guy who was, like when you talk about the room that you have, like personalities on anybody's quote unquote teammates, whatever job you have, personalities matter. The people you work with matter.
Well, one thing you would say is with Kyle, he is going to be very susceptible to losing. If the 49ers continue to have success, losing offensive assistants to become head coaches, because they are going to come to him and McVay fast if they keep winning. And if their defense plays well, as it has the last 3 years, he's going to lose defensive coordinators. So he's going to get pillaged on both sides. Look at McVay this year. Is Raheem Morris now kind of like a Saleh? Like he got a couple interviews this year. It feels like he's going to be more in the mix next year. You're going to lose whoever your Kevin O'Connell, your Mike McDaniel is. And then if your defense plays well, and those type guys like physical players, right? I mean, I give McVay credit. Like he's going after Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey. Like the type guy Kyle might have missed, but Javon Kinlaw. We saw him. We're like, I get it. Like they're just going to lose. He's going to get pillaged on both sides. I mean, but it happened to that's just success, right? It happened to Andy for years, losing offensive guys and defensive coordinators.
Well, it's what's crazy about some of these trees, like the Reed, Gruden,
Andy lost special teamer too.
Shanahan, like these Niner trees. And who did Andy lose?
John Harbaugh, once upon a time.
Oh, some of these trees. I do think you put enough guys out there that just by the volume of guys that you put out, one of them will get fired and come back to your staff. Some of these staffs, guys never return. Shanahan was good. Holmgren was good. Andy Reid was good. Gruden was good. Mariucci became a head coach, then was like, I'm good. It's incredible how many guys. Normally, one guy gets fired and eventually he's back on your staff or something like that, and you can cycle him through.
It happened with Spagnuolo. Was on his sweet Eagles teams, goes to the Giants, because they had Jim Johnson, and then he kind of cycled back years later, right? And now has been a good defensive coordinator.
That's true.
It's part of when it happens to you young. If you can maintain success as Andy Reid, you are going to just be an open net to would it shock you if Matt Nagy goes back? It's just that's a little quick, but if Kyle does this for 15 years, there's just going to be some cycle guys coming back.
Yeah.
And you would say that to me, I'd have the Jets circled if that bad boy might not last long.
No. You're saying Robert Saleh replaces DeMeco Ryans?
You could also say the history of the history of the Dolphins. I mean, if McDaniel lasts more than 3 years, that to me a pretty big upset. Not because he might not be a good coach, just that fucking place is just people go there to get spit out.
This is a fascinating coaching situation. Just the Dolphins now.
Wouldn't you say the division too? The Bills are a powerhouse and Belichick's just better.
Yeah.
His team is.
Well, can he elevate his quarterback? And who's he picked to be his defensive coordinator? Because that was the one thing you said with Miami. They're going to be in a bunch of games because Brian Flores knows how to coach. He's not replacing some slappy coach.
Well, they weren't any good on offense. They were tough and physical and kept games low scoring.
Yep.
Should he just rehire Brian Flores as defensive coordinator?
With a mustache? Ryan Torres has now become his DC.
Ron Mexico?
Ron Mexico? No, what was the one we heard the other day? Bobby Trees.
Bobby Trees. Bobby Trees is a good name.
A real nickname, but it's good. I mean, it goes back. The other thing on Kyle is just it's, player development. It's coach development too. Can you replace your own coaches with guys who speak your language and know how to do what you want? Belichick's philosophy has been, I'll just do everything myself, and then it doesn't hurt when people leave as much.
But one thing you got to give Bill a lot of credit at, I was watching Brian Daboll's introductory press conference, and he's like, my career started in the NFL when Bill hired me in 2000. And he hired Brian Daboll, Josh McDaniels, Brian Flores. Some of the clips, and I started watching Man in the Arena. Brady's rookie year. I mean, one of the youngest guys on staff is Mangini in the background, who's a quality control guy. He didn't hire, guys that were already established in the league. He found just 10 Mike McDaniels.
Yeah.
And it'd just be interesting. It's hard to do, but fuck, Bill did it over and over and over again. Now, a lot of them didn't become good head coaches.
But they knew how to work for Bill.
They thrived.
Which is
and
the
he
key.
gave them legit roles, right? They became coordinators and special teams coordinators. And he just, that is going to be the next iteration. Andy did it forever. Sean McDermott, Brett Veaches, these guys that started as the lowest level guy and just kind of built them up. Part of it is you start getting the cream of the crop reaching out to you, right? And Bill had, I wouldn't say it's lucky. They got in on the John Carroll tree. So all those guys were all friends and played with each other, and they just hired, their buddies all just happened to be Brian Daboll, Josh McDaniels, Ziegler, Caserio. That team just happened to have 7 guys that all aspired to work in the NFL. I don't know what Kyle's where they come from, but he's got to find it, right? Stanford? I don't know. I mean,
where'd Questy come from? Private finance?
Yeah, they just found him at one of the tall skyscrapers
Morgan Stanley.
in San Francisco. I do think this. When I got lucky to be hired by Andy Reid and just the Eagles, I just got to know their guy that came through Philadelphia very well. I do think from a coaching standpoint, though, people get very aggressive with going, clearly a young guy wants in with Bill Belichick. A young guy wants in with Andy Reid. I think a young guy is going to want in with Kyle and McVay. You'd be crazy not to.